Power is of two kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment and other by acts of love. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear of punishment, said Mahatma Gandhi. Hello everyone, welcome to English Tutorials by Poonam. In this video, I will be discussing the story Indigo, an excerpt from Louis Fischer's The Life of Mahatma Gandhi from CBSE Class 12th English Core Textbook Flamingo. On April 10, 2017, the Bihar government launched a year-long celebrations to mark the centenary of Mahatma Gandhi's Champaran Satyagraha. To commemorate the occasion, the government released a new stamp which you can see on the slide. In this video, I will be discussing about the author, theme, sub-theme and detailed explanation of the story Indigo by using mind map. About the author, Louis Fischer was born in Philadelphia in 1896. He was a Jewish-American journalist. Fischer made a career as a journalist and wrote for the New York Times, the Saturday Review, and Asian publications. His famous works include The God That Failed, a contribution to the ex-communist treatise, published in 1949, Life of Mahatma Gandhi, published in 1982, as well as Life of Lenin, which won the 1965 National Book Award in History and Biography. Mahatma Gandhi became a legend in his own time. A tireless fighter for human rights, for Indian independence, his strategy of satyagraha or passive resistance earned him the admiration of millions. Louis Fischer's biography is the definitive account of Gandhi's life. It tells the astonishing story of one man who changed the world forever. According to Sir Richard Attenborough, it's the best biography of Gandhi. He says, "I was enthralled from the first page and it changed my life." According to the Times, a monumental yet intimate biography, a vivid portrait of a man, the statesman and the saint. Let's focus on the theme first. Indigo deals with the account of an unequal battle between the oppressed and the oppressors, where in spite of all the odds, the oppressed are able to foil the wicked designs of the avaricious landlords. Truthfulness, sincerity of purpose, and tireless efforts of Indian leaders as well as masses eventually bear fruit and spell the triumph of the campaign against the unjust and callous Britishers. The theme also highlights the leadership shown by Mahatma Gandhi to secure justice for oppressed people through convincing argumentation and negotiation. Sub-theme of the story focuses on the contributions made by anonymous Indians to the freedom movement. Indigo is the story of how Gandhiji decided to urge the departure of the British from India, our motherland. It is an account of British high-handedness and oppression and contributions made by the masses to the freedom movement. The events and facts in the chapter help the reader understand the method of Gandhian activism very clearly. The Champaran episode was instrumental in bringing revolution in Indian freedom movement. A simple sharecroppers entreaty brings the historical change to learn courage and self-reliance to protect against the wrongdoers for their rights. Gandhi meets Rajkumar Shukla. Gandhi started telling the story of how he urged the British to leave India to Fischer when he visited Gandhi at his Sevagram ashram in 1942. It goes back to the year 1916. Gandhi attended the annual convention of the Indian National Congress in Lucknow. 2,301 delegates and many visitors were present. Among his many visitors was Rajkumar Shukla. He was from Champaran. A poor indigo farmer requested him to come to Champaran. Gandhi had never heard of the place, which was at the foothills of the Himalayas near Nepal. He told Gandhiji about the plight of poor peasants at the hands of British landlords. They were suffering because of the unjust system of the British, so someone directed Shukla to Gandhi. Rajkumar Shukla's persistence pays. Gandhi was not immediately available to go anywhere. He told Shukla he had an appointment in Kanpur and was also committed to go to other parts of India. Shukla accompanied him everywhere. Then Gandhi returned to his ashram near Ahmedabad and Rajkumar Shukla followed him to the ashram. For weeks he never left Gandhiji's side. Gandhi was impressed by the sharecroppers' tenacity, perseverance, his determination, so finally he agreed to accompany him to Champaran immediately after his Calcutta visit. Let me first tell you about the sharecropping arrangement and why it was irksome for Indian sharecroppers. Most of the arable land in the Champaran district was divided into large estates owned by Englishmen and worked by Indian tenants. The chief commercial crop was indigo. The landlords compelled all tenants to plant 3/20 or 15% of their holdings with indigo and surrendered the entire indigo harvest as rent. This was done by long-term contract. Gandhi on his way to Champaran. Month later, Shukla kept his word and turned up in Calcutta to meet Gandhi. He waited patiently till Gandhi was free before meeting him. Then both of them took the train to Patna, Bihar. Shukla took him to the house of a lawyer called Rajendra Prasad, who later became the president of the Congress party and the country. He was not in the town. His servants recognized Shukla as the peasant who kept asking Prasad for help. Following the unfair tradition of caste system, they let him stay on the grounds along with his fellow peasant who was Gandhi himself. Gandhi decided to go first to Muzaffarpur, which was en route to Champaran, to obtain more complete information about conditions that Shukla was capable of imparting. He accordingly sent a telegram to Professor J.B. Kriplani, whom he had seen at Tagore's Shanti Niketan school. At midnight 15 April 1917, Kriplani met Gandhi at the station with a crowd of his students. Gandhi appreciated Kriplani for sheltering him at a time that no government professor would have done so. In smaller localities, the Indians were afraid to show sympathy for advocates of home rule. The Muzaffarpur lawyers who usually represented the sharecroppers in the courts informed him about the cases and their fees. Gandhi rebuked the lawyers for charging high fees and told them that for people who were so crushed, the law was of no use. They needed to be free from fear. So Gandhi told them that the real relief for peasants was to be free from fear. Courts were useless for fear-stricken peasants. Gandhiji learns about the problems of synthetic indigo. The landowners came to know about synthetic indigo developed in Germany. As a result, they forced the sharecroppers to pay them compensation for being freed from this agreement. Many peasants signed contracts on these stringent and unfair terms. Those who resisted, the landlords, hired thugs to intimidate them. Meanwhile, the information about synthetic indigo reached the illiterate sharecroppers who had signed the documents. They felt cheated and wanted their money back. At this point, Gandhiji arrived in Champaran. Gandhiji started gathering details. First, he visited the secretary of the British Landlords Association. The secretary told him that they could give no information to an outsider. Next, Gandhiji called on the British official commissioner of the Trihut division in which the Champaran district lay. He bullied Gandhiji and advised him to leave Trihut immediately. Gandhiji did not leave. Instead, he proceeded to Motihari, the capital of Champaran. Several lawyers accompanied him. At the railway station, a vast multitude greeted him. He continued his investigations. A report came in that a peasant had been maltreated in a nearby village. Gandhiji decided to go and see him. He had not proceeded far when the police superintendent's messenger overtook him and ordered him to return to town and served him with an official notice to leave Champaran immediately. Gandhi signed a receipt for the notice and wrote on it that he would disobey the order. In consequence, Gandhi received a summons to appear in the court the next day. All night Gandhi remained awake. He telegraphed Rajendra Prasad to come from Bihar. With influential friends, he sent instructions to the ashram. He wired a full report to the viceroy. Morning found the town of Motihari black with peasants. They had merely heard that a Mahatma who wanted to help them was in trouble with the authorities. Their spontaneous demonstration in thousands around the courthouse was the beginning of their liberation from fear of the British. The official felt powerless without Gandhiji's cooperation. Gandhi proved that British power was no longer unchallengeable. The situation puzzled the authorities. They wanted to postpone the trial. Gandhi disagreed. Instead, he pleaded guilty and read a statement that he wanted to obey the law but answered to the higher voice, the voice of conscience. He asked the penalty due. The magistrate announced a 2-hour break during which he wanted Gandhi bailed out, but Gandhi refused. The magistrate released him without bail. The court reassembled only for the judge to postpone the judgment for days. Gandhiji's lawyer friends conferred together and concluded that it would be a shameful desertion if they, the locals, left Gandhi at this moment. They informed Gandhi that they too were ready to go to jail with him. Gandhi was pleased and declared that the Battle of Champaran is won. Many days later, Gandhi received a letter from the magistrate informing him that the lieutenant governor of the province had ordered the case to be dropped. This was the first victory of civil disobedience in India. Gandhi and the lawyers then collected evidence and documents from about 10,000 peasants before he met the lieutenant governor of the province, who finally agreed to set up an inquiry commission. Gandhi was the sole representative of the peasants in the commission. Confronted by the evidence provided by the official inquiry, the planters decided in principle to make refunds to the peasants. The representative of the planters offered to refund 25%. Gandhi agreed, thus breaking the deadlock. Gandhi explained that the amount of the refund was less important than the fact that the landlords had been obliged to surrender part of the money and with it part of their prestige. Now the peasant saw that he had rights and defenders. He learned courage. Few years later, British planters abandoned their estates and land was given to the peasants. Gandhi dedicated almost a year to secure justice for the farmers of Champaran. The Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhiji's life. What I did, he explained, was a very ordinary thing. I declared that the British could not order me about in my own country. He tried to mold a new free India who could stand on his own feet and thus make India free. But Gandhi did not stop there. He also strove hard to improve the social, cultural, and health conditions of the district. He saw the cultural and social backwardness in the Champaran villages and wanted to do something about it immediately. He appealed for the teachers Mahadev Desai and Narhari Parekh, 2 young disciples and their wives volunteered for the work. Several more came from Bombay, Pune, and other distant parts of the land. Devdas, Gandhi's youngest son, arrived from the ashram and so did Mrs. Gandhi. Primary schools were opened in 6 villages and Kasturba Bai taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. The Champaran agitation did not begin as an act of defiance. It grew out of an attempt to alleviate the distress of large number of poor peasants. Gandhi was always concerned about the practical problems of people, not mere philosophies. In addition, all his actions were focused on ensuring that Indians would make themselves self-reliant rather than dependent on others. In the early days of the Champaran movement, Gandhiji's lawyer friends wanted Charles Ferrer Andrews, an English follower of Gandhi, to stay in Champaran and help them. Gandhi strongly refused and told his friends that asking an Englishman for support was a sign of weakness. He said, "You think that in this unequal fight, it would be helpful if we have an Englishman on our side. This shows the weakness of our heart. The cause is just and you must rely upon yourselves to win the battle. You should not seek a prop in Mr. Andrews because he happens to be an Englishman." Gandhi, in this way, taught them a lesson in self-reliance. Self-reliance, Indian independence, and help to sharecroppers were all bound together. Thus, we can say that helping the peasants towards self-reliance and freeing them from the oppression of the British landlords provided Gandhiji with the perfect stimulus for initiating the movement for independence through peaceful means. Let's talk about the title now. The title Indigo focuses our attention on the issue of exploitation of Indian sharecroppers at the hands of cruel British planters. The British compelled them through a long-term agreement to plant indigo on 15% of their land and surrender their entire harvest as rent. After the development of synthetic indigo by Germany, the British planters extracted money from the peasants as compensation for being released from the 15% agreement. The peasants who wanted their money back filed civil suits. Rajkumar Shukla persuaded Gandhi to take up the case of indigo sharecroppers. So indigo sharecropping exemplifies the injustice of the British and the Indian submission to British authority. The Champaran movement that centered on indigo sharecropping led to the social and cultural upliftment of the peasants. Thus, the title Indigo is highly suggestive and appropriate. The chapter Indigo highlights the very important message. Patience, perseverance and determination can help one overcome all odds and adversities. While managing crisis, one should focus on the solution rather than the problem. Apart from it, one should learn to be self-reliant instead of looking for shoulders to lean upon. The chapter also conveys the message that it is important to teach people courage and enable them to fight their own battles independently and fearlessly, rather than just lending support to them in critical situations. Main characters in the story: Rajkumar Shukla, a sharecropper; Dr. Rajendra Prasad, advocate and first president of India; Charles Ferrer in Rio, a follower of Gandhiji; Kasturba Bai, wife of Gandhiji; Devdas, youngest son of Gandhiji. With this, we come to the end of this lecture. Don't forget to give your valuable feedback. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share and subscribe. English Tutorials by Poonam Thakur.